The sound of 6 senior officers laughing at a woman is something I will carry for the rest of my life. Not because it was loud. It wasn't. It was the kind of laugh that lives in the chest, a single collective exhale, the kind that says we all agree without anyone having to vote. I laughed too. That is the part I return to. I laughed with them. And I did not stop it, and I have not forgiven myself for either. This was the Joint Logistics and Theater Command Review, Naval Station Keller, February, the coldest week of a cold year. 6 officers around a gray table in a gray room. Rear Admiral Voss presiding, 2 captains, a commander, a senior NATO liaison, and me, Lieutenant Colonel, logistics coordination, 16 years in. We had been running asset reviews since Eero 800. At 10:40, the door opened and she walked in. She came in the way she did everything I later understood, without announcement and without apology. Medium height, close-cropped hair, silver at the temples, a dark blue working uniform with no visible rank insignia, the Naval Liaison Protocol, joint conference strips the hardware to keep the politics down. She set a thin briefing folder on the table, pulled out the chair at the far end, and sat. Rear Admiral Voss looked at her the way men like him look at people who enter without being introduced. He let the silence stretch a few seconds, long enough to make the point, and then asked, pleasantly, "And what's your rank for the record, ma'am? Just so we have it noted." He said it with a half smile. The word just carried the whole weight of it. She looked at him. She didn't answer immediately, not because she was startled, I understand now, but because she was deciding whether the question deserved the same energy she would give a real question. She settled on a simple answer. "I'll be in the observer role today," she said. Voss nodded slowly, the way men nod when they've made their point without having to spell it out. One of the captains to my left made a small sound, not quite a laugh, but close enough. I made the same sound. I'm not proud of it. We moved on. The review ran for another 40 minutes. She said nothing. She sat at the end of the table with her folder closed, and when we broke to pull updated transit logs at 11:30, she stood and walked to the window and looked out at the harbor. That's all. She looked at the water. Rear Admiral Voss came up behind me at the side table while I was pulling the Sector 7 movement files. He said quietly that we needed to figure out who had added a civilian attaché to a senior command review without clearing it through his office. He wasn't asking me to do anything about it. He was establishing that she was beneath the level of the room. I said nothing. I was 16 years into a career that had taught me exactly when to say nothing, and I said it. At 11:45, the door opened again. General Harwick. I had not known he was coming. Nobody in that room had, judging by the way every officer moved, a straightening, a gathering, that involuntary current that runs through a room when someone 3 levels above everyone else walks in. Harwick ran Theater Command, Northern Division. He had 4 stars and the kind of quiet that fills a room before he says a word. He looked at the table. He looked at her. Standing at the window, he said, "Admiral." The room stopped. She turned from the window. "General." That was the whole exchange. 6 words between them, and Rear Admiral Vossface went through 4 expressions in the time it takes to draw a breath. Harwick set his own folder on the table, sat down beside her. He looked around the room once, not a long look, just enough to establish that he understood exactly what had happened in the last hour. And then he reached across the table, picked up Voss's copy of the theater briefing materials, and slid it down to her. "You'll want the Sector 4 and 5 overlays," he said. "Your transit corridor runs through both." He looked at Voss. "The Admiral will be running the Northern Transit operation. I wanted her to hear the logistics posture before the command handoff this afternoon." I did not breathe. "Her full command profile is in the last tab of your review packet," Harwick said, to the room now. "I'd suggest you read it." The packets had been sitting in front of us all morning. I reached for mine. Most of the men around that table did the same, but slowly, carefully, the way you move when you are aware of being watched. I found the last tab. I opened it. Fleet Commander, 2nd Naval Strike Group. 2 stars. 22 years of active service. 4 combat deployments. 2 in contested northern waters. 1 in the South China littoral. 1 classified and listed only as duration, 14 months. Theater commendations, 9. Combat action ribbon. 3 fleet citations. Call sign. Cold Harbor. The last entry in her operational summary was a single line. Longest hostile water transit by a surface group in fleet history. 418 personnel extracted. 0 losses, 31 days in denied corridor. I read that line twice. I looked up at her. She was reading the Sector 4 overlay. Her expression was the same as when she had walked in. Not satisfied, not cold, not performing anything for the room. She was simply working. The water was still there, outside the window behind her, and the gray February light was on the harbor, and she turned a page. Rear Admiral Voss stood up. He did it without being told, without anyone looking at him, without any visible cue. He stood up, and he came to attention, and he rendered a full formal salute, clean, 4 count, the kind that does not leave anything out. And before the salute was finished, every other officer in that room was on their feet. The 2 captains, the commander, the NATO liaison, me. She did not look up immediately. She finished the line she was reading. Then she looked up, and she returned the salute, the same clean 4 count, and she said, "At ease." And she went back to the page. Harwick said nothing. He didn't need to. The rest of the review lasted 40 minutes. She ran her half of it, the way she'd walked in, without announcement, without theater. When she spoke, it was to point at something specific on a map, or to ask a numbered question that required a numbered answer. She did not explain herself. She did not acknowledge the first hour. When it was over, she gathered her folder, stood and said, "Thank you, General," and walked out. That was it. No ceremony on her end. Whatever ceremony there was, she had not arranged it. Voss asked no more questions for the remainder of that review. He answered hers, clean, short, the way a man answers when he is paying close attention to how much he has already cost himself. The captains did the same. There was no apology spoken in that room, and she did not seem to want one. What she wanted, as far as I could tell, was the Sector 5 transit corridor data and an honest answer about current asset positioning in the northern approach. She got both. She asked follow-up questions that told me, listening, that she had already done the reading, not just our briefing materials, but the supplemental logistics files that most of us in that room had only skimmed. She had done her homework the night before, alone, in whatever spare office they had given her, without ceremony and without staff. When Harwick stood to close the review, he said only that the Northern Transit operation was in capable hands, and that he expected full logistics support from every stakeholder in the room. He looked at Voss when he said it. Voss did not look away. I found out more later, not through official channels, but through the kind of conversations that happen in hallways when senior are trying to reconstruct their own understanding of a morning. The Sector 9 transit 3 years prior. Cold Harbor on the radio, 14 surface assets threading a denied corridor in winter darkness, hostile contact on day 4, and she brought all 14 out. The fleet record. 41 countries had tracked that transit on their boards. She had been recalled to Theater Command 2 weeks ago for the Northern handoff briefing that Harwick mentioned, and someone on the liaison staff had scheduled her into our review as an observer because they had not fully understood what she was. Or, I thought about it more carefully later, because she had asked to come in that way. Without the hardware, without the announcement. I never confirmed it, but I thought about it. Voss requested a reassignment 4 months after that morning. I do not know if the two things are connected. I have chosen not to speculate. I think about the harbor a lot. The way she stood at the window during the break, looking at the water like it was something she recognized, like she and it had an understanding that the rest of us were not part of. I have stood at that window since. It is a gray harbor on a gray coast, and it does not tell you anything that it did not tell you the day before. But when she looked at it, it looked like a place she had earned the right to know. 16 years in, and I had laughed at a woman with 4 stars worth of earned ground under her feet, and 418 souls she had brought home through water that had tried to take them. I had laughed because the man beside me laughed, and because I was the kind of officer who had learned exactly when to say nothing. I was good at it. I had practiced. I am still in the service. I run a different kind of review now, one where I read the last tab first, every time, without exception. I do not laugh in the early parts of a morning when I do not yet know what the day is carrying. That is the instruction she left in that room, without leaving it for me specifically. She did not teach me anything. She simply walked in and sat down, and looked at the water and did her work, and the room sorted itself out around what she was. I have not spoken her name in this account, and I will not. She is Cold Harbor. She is the transit record. She is 418 people who are alive and home. That is more name than most of us will ever carry. The harbor is gray and cold in February, and some things you earn the right to look at. I know what I am still trying to earn.